All right. Hello, everyone. I am Kim Kimball, host of the Sensitive Podcast and somatic leadership coach for highly sensitive women in business, women leaders, coaches, entrepreneurs. And I am just really, really excited for this podcast today with Alana. I will allow her to introduce herself and we can dive in.
Hey, Kim, thanks for having me. Um, a little about me. I'm a web designer. Specifically, I design websites that are calming and gentle on the nervous system, good for people and considerate for our planet. So I mostly work with kind businesses in the areas of health and wellness, coaching, therapy, creatives, photographers, and environmental conservation area, non-for-profit areas.
Yes.
And then I guess the other thing that I do as well in terms of work is I teach other web designers through my 1-week website process how to create a kind and calm web design business. So you can sort of see a theme coming through here with all of my work. And then I guess on the non-work side, I've been digital slow matting for the last 2.5 years. And I currently live in Thailand, moving between Thailand and my home country of Australia. And a fun little fact is I play the clarinet with my partner in a jazz blues band as well.
Oh, cool. So cool.
Yeah.
And Alana designed my website for me. And I specifically, I really didn't entertain any other options of anybody else to design my website because I just adore your designs so much. And they are specifically, just as she said, so calming for the nervous system and just give this really lovely, grounded, calm feel to them, which is very intentional in her work and just lends itself so well to being helpful for us highly sensitive individuals. And I just love that. So please make sure to check out my website and marvel at her work because I'm just so pleased with the finished product. But one of the reasons that I wanted to bring Alana on my podcast is that I think that a lot of highly sensitive, neurodivergent, neurocomplex people can often feel this sensation of feeling trapped in our lives. And when I say that, I mean like that we have to do things the way that the world would have us do them, which is built for neurotypical people, and can end us up in this place of burnout, of extreme dissatisfaction with our work, with our lives, and it can really be this place of intense grappling of this intense inner turmoil. At least I have felt that in my life, of feeling like, well, I have to do this because I have to get paid, I have to make a living, I have to live, I this is just part of life. And yet, at least for me, it felt like it was literally killing me. And I specifically wanted to bring Alana on because I think she is such a beautiful example of what is possible to build a life that truly fits you. And she did such a wonderful job in her introduction of really painting a picture of it. This touches all aspects, right? Career and a slow mad life and leaving space for interests and so many things. And so I just think that this podcast is going to be so rich of really painting for you what is possible. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to come on and paint that picture for us, Alana. But I know that you struggled with a really intense period of burnout yourself at one point in your career. And like I said, that you have really carefully crafted a life and business, both, not just one or the other, that fit you as a highly sensitive person. And so I'm wondering if you would mind sharing a little bit about that journey to honoring your sensitive nervous system with us.
Yeah, sure. I think that I've actually, when I look back, gone through 3 burnout periods, and they significantly got worse each time. And I wasn't really identifying that they were burnouts until the final one in 2018, which took me a long, long road to recover from. And, you know, each time that they happened, I did have this realization of like, I'm back out of alignment. I'm back out of alignment. Oh, here I am again. And then, you know, would go through a period of beating myself up and so on. And so I think that when I talk about this and I say I've recovered from burnout, it is still always highly on my radar. And it is something that I have to be on the ball about all the time. So, you know, before we started recording, I was telling you that I just had a 5-week break, because in the middle of this year, I could see the signs and I could see what was coming if I didn't, you know, if I didn't put a stop to it. So I have to be on the ball with myself all the time, because it's a tendency that I do have. But I guess specifically the one that you're asking about was in 2018, where I really did hit rock bottom. So, you know, my relationship, my 3-year relationship ended. The business that I had been trying to start for about 3 or 4 years, because I didn't want to go back to the corporate world, which it had burnt me out, wasn't working. I think I had maybe like $2,000 in my bank, 2,000 Australian dollars in my bank account or something like that. Nowhere to live, a suitcase, and that was basically about it. And I was down. And then to make matters worse, because I had worked myself so hard, my health collapsed as well. And I mean, all of those other things I could deal with, but if you don't have your health, you've got nothing. That was like a really big wake up call for me. And I think it took me maybe 3 years. Like now I can say I'm recovered from burnout. So that's 4 years now. It's, you know, people say, oh, I'm burnt out. But like, yeah, I wish that maybe someone had explained to me the true consequences of true burnout on my way there, because yeah, it was a long, long climb back. But I think that what ended up happening was fortunately coincided with me having found this eco-village in Vanuatu. I won't go into all the details about that, but basically I was able to switch off for 2 months. And in that time, I basically just wandered the forest and swam in the freezing cold river and meditated and ate raw food. I was eating raw food because that was all that my digestive system could handle at the time. So I ended up being raw vegan for 2.5, 3 years. And when I was in this eco village in Vanuatu, I really started to look at why did this happen? How did I get this so wrong? And at the core of it, I could really see that the foundations that I had built my life on were eroded or weren't built correctly from the beginning, weren't built from a place of love and care and trust in myself. And I think burnout really does stem from not loving yourself, not trusting yourself, and ultimately, therefore, not trusting in the flow of life. And when you don't have those 3 things, you push, you force, you overgive, you become resentful, you're out of tune with possibilities and opportunities because you're pushing and forcing forward. And I know this because I do it all the time. You know, I catch myself doing it all the time, but this was significant because of the impact that it had on my physical and my emotional health. So the process, I guess, of going back to honoring my nervous system was really gradual. Just like I had to rebuild my physical health, I had to rebuild the foundations and my emotional strength and health as well. And as I started to build those, you know, initially as I came back into the real world and started rebuilding my life, I was very sensitive because I was burnt out. And so, you know, I couldn't work long hours, and there were lots of things that I just couldn't do anymore because my body wouldn't allow it. But as time has gone on, I just realized that actually it's not just because of burnout. My nervous system is very, very sensitive, and it needs an extra level of care that a lot of other people potentially don't need. So now it's constant, you know, constantly checking, regulating my nervous system. Yeah.
You said so much within that
Sorry.
like it brought up emotions for me. I felt myself getting a bit emotional. You talking about how, you know, the root of burnout, and I'm not going to get your exact words right, but talking about that lack of self-trust for me, I've come to a big realization how burnout is always rooted in a lack of self-acceptance, is what I say.
Yeah.
There is this lack of self-acceptance. There is this disconnection from self. Disconnection from your needs, like you're talking about, that just drives you to push and force and override and not pay attention to. And what I hear was a very gradual process for you of coming back into alignment, coming back into attunement with self, is reaching this place now where it is this not just one time, right? Because I think that we can have this idea in our minds of like, well, now I'm out of burnout, so I don't have to be vigilant like that anymore. But what I think the point is that you're illustrating so well here is you have to come into a place of constant attunement with self. It's like the root of the burnout itself is the lack of attunement, and the antidote is the not just I'm going to be attuned this one time and sort of set up my life so that I no longer have to be attuned ever again, but the antidote is that constant attunement. And I hear you doing that so beautifully. So yeah.
Some days.
Yeah. And it's great that you say some days, because when we get ourselves out of it and let's say we're attuned, I don't know, number 75% of the time, like we can still have a bit of a margin and a buffer there, right? Because we have kind of put all these deposits in where you can have a little bit more of a buffer. So it's not like and that's a great thing for you to say someday, because it highlights that we're not going to be perfect at this.
Yeah.
Really ever. And yet we can be more attuned and bring ourselves out of burnout and prevent future burnout.
And I think that's a thing too, you know, with I know that you're very similar to me in terms of high functioning women, you know, and I think that the trap here is that you want to be perfect, or you want, like, our tendency is to want to get things right, overperform, high perform. So then when you're talking about attuning here, okay, I've got to attune properly every day. I've got to make sure that I'm doing this correctly, you know, and that's what I was saying before we started recording. When I started my holidays, you know, the first week, my mind was the monster. And I was like, I should be doing this. I should be sitting down to meditate. I should be going for a walk on the beach. I should be, because quickly I've got to get myself back into attunement. And it's the opposite of actually what I needed in that moment. So I think allowing ourselves that we're not going to get that attunement perfect all the time. And sometimes it's better if we actually just put that down. And that leads us back to the space of attunement without having to try all the things and do all the things to get us there. Yeah.
Well, Alana, I feel like I could just end the podcast now and we would have all gotten so much out of it just in a short little snippet. Nonetheless, I will continue. This is just, so rich. So I also just see that you have one thing that I admire so much about you, and I feel like you've done so incredibly well, is crafting a business model that truly honors your nervous system and the way that you work best. And so I'm curious how you landed on, of course, obviously feel free to share some about what the business model is that I'm talking about and how you landed on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So my business model is the 1 week website model. So it's essentially providing websites in 1 week. And I think sometimes when I say that, I think people instantly think, oh, quick hustle, like get that over the line, like quick and dirty sort of feel. But that's not how I see 1 week websites. I see them as a safe container in which we create something really beautiful. And as a highly sensitive web designer working with highly sensitive entrepreneurs, having that safe container within a timeline to do that in feels very calm and secure for all parties involved. So that's my vision of the 1 week website model. But how I came to doing this is really some of it, like I think all entrepreneurs experience, was accidental and some of it was very intentional. So, becoming a web designer was probably accidental for me in terms of I started blogging and then people asked me to do their websites. And that's how I really discovered that I like web design. And I really love how it marries a lot of my past work in IT, but it marries together these, we'll probably talk a lot about dichotomies in this interview, but it marries one of my dichotomies really nicely together, which is my desire for creativity and beauty, and also my desire for structure and strategy. So it brings both of those together through coding. Like coding is very structured and mathematical, but it creates something really beautiful out the other side, which I really love. But in terms of the 1 week website model, when I look back, I really see that it was created in response. And I know you're familiar, and probably a lot of your listeners are maybe familiar with Danny Gardner's work and human design. So I'm a generator in human design. And so to create offerings in my business, Danny teaches that you want to create things in response. And one of the things that she said to me one day, which I found really interesting, was that it's not just necessarily in response to your audience, but it can be in response to your own needs as well and what you're desiring. And I found that a really interesting alternative way. And then when I looked back at things that I had created in my business, I saw that that was absolutely true. So my 1 week website model, there's sort of 3 key areas that I responded to. So the first one was an obvious gap in the marketplace. And this just really happened because I was working with women in business. I was teaching them how to podcast and also doing some business coaching as well. And I would say to them, just go and add this page on your website, blah, blah, blah. Really easy. It won't take you long. And always they would come back to me and say, I can't do it. My website is I didn't have the training, or my website is too heavily coded. I can't make that. And I thought, this is ridiculous. These women have paid thousands for these websites. And we live in a time where our businesses adapt and evolve really quickly. So we need to be able to change our websites. And I thought, this is not ethical in many ways to be creating websites that people can't change themselves. And I think that's where I first started to think about this idea of kind design from the actual business owner's view is where it started to come in first. It's like easy for you to use and update. So there was that. And then I guess I was really interested in web design. But I was doing trainings and learning how to code and all of these things. This was maybe like 4 years ago, just after I came back from Vanuatu. And I just thought, I love this, but I cannot have a traditional web design business model. It's not possible for me being burnt out like I am. And, you know, even now I'm not burnt out, I still don't have a traditional web design business model because it doesn't work for my sensitivities. So I was searching for something alternative, and a mastermind teacher made a suggestion for me, which was along the 1 week website model. And it just went like, it was just immediate. I could see like a pathway forward. I could see how it would really work for me in terms of the way that I like to work. So the model itself, you know, short, sharp sprint, and then a period of rest. Like, I don't do them back to back, and I only do one website each week. I'm able to focus and dedicate to myself to that one project and to that one client. And that feels really good for my nervous system and really good for my client, because I'm, you know, it's a premium service that I'm 100% there for them in that week. And I still got to be creatively fulfilled, and particularly when I was just starting out and feeling like, you know, all that self-doubt when you start any sort of new endeavor. Oh, can I even be a designer? You know, am I even good at this? It really created a safe container for me to start with, because I could make a design, I could test it, and so on. And as I started to do these, then that's when I discovered that my clientele also really valued this safe container to work within. And then I guess the third thing that I responded to was the kind, calm aspect of it. So coming back from Vanuatu and getting back behind my screen and thinking, okay, I need to start earning income here. The internet was an incredibly overwhelming place for me. Pop-ups, flashing things, opt-ins, get this now, scarcity tactics. I was like, whoa, I maybe didn't realize how impactful this was on my nervous system prior to switching offline for a while. And so I started just designing really for myself. Like, the designs that I created were naturally just calming. And I didn't even realize that's what I was doing at the time. It just made sense to me, you know. And then I did a few projects for clients, and they said to me, my clients are telling their clients were telling them, oh, your website's so calming. I could really find what I was looking for. And I was like, oh, not the only one, you know, I'm not the only one that wants this. And then when I went back and looked at it, I was like, okay, yeah. And the benefits really are threefold, you know, which is what makes it so powerful. Like, it benefits our businesses because people can find the information that they need in a calm way. It actually makes us stand out more because we're not doing the typical marketing things that you expect. It benefits us, or people in general. Our nervous systems feel better when we're navigating through, and we feel better as business owners as well, because that aligns more with our values and our ethics. And actually, something that I'm exploring more and more now is kind and calm design actually benefits our planet as well. So you have a lighter designed website, or one that's more easier to navigate. It uses less energy because people can find the information they need faster. So it lowers the carbon footprint of your website and your business. So yeah, that's the really long story of, yeah, there are those three responses, I guess. Yeah.
And I just hear so much intentionality and care baked into your entire business model, and intentionality and care going both ways, right? For you, for your own nervous system, and for your clients' nervous system, and really threefold again, because also the people who are coming to your client's website. And so you have really baked in this intentionality and care across the board. And I can say, as one of your clients, I felt it tremendously. You know, the word I would use when I worked with you is that I felt so held. Um, I felt really, really held and very cared for the entire time. And, you know, I think that the thing that I want to bring forward from what you shared and all of this, like I said, is the intentionality. And I think a lot of times we can think that we will end up in a life that truly fits us by happenstance. And that it can be this sort of thing of like, somehow, like, the wind is going to carry me to something that just really, really fits me. And the thing that I want to bring forward, like I said, from what you're sharing, is just the level of intentionality that I think, you know, I wish that it was happenstance, but I share your experience, Alana, of the level of intentionality that is needed to create a life and a business that truly fits you like a glove, you know, that you're putting on, of like, this is made for me. It's made for you because you created it for you. And you really looked at exactly what is going to be sustainable for you, what is going to light you up, what is going to fit your nervous system, what are my needs, what are my people's needs. And I don't mean to make this sound intimidating. And also, just like Alana is sharing, this is over the course of years. So I also want to emphasize that point. I know for me, it's been over the course of years as well. This is not an overnight process where you're just going to like, oh, you know, but I really just want to say that it's this intentionality and care that allows you to craft a life and a business that truly fits you. It's not something that just happens. So, yeah, just so beautiful how you did that. And I heard within what you were sharing that, you know, you really had to come to terms with, I can't work the way other people may work. I can't travel the way other people may travel. I can't do online business in the same way as potentially some others. And I'm curious how you got to the point of really starting to be courageous enough to do things your way.
Yeah, I actually think this will tie in really nicely with what you were just talking about, creating, like being really intentional around what you create and creating something that fits you like a glove. Okay, so first of all, I think how I got here wasn't really very pretty. You know, I came through doing a lot of things the wrong way. But I don't think we all have to do that. That's just been my journey. As I said, you know, several times of burnout, realizing I'm living out of alignment, getting sick. When I was younger, I suffered from depression. Now that I'm older, it more looks like anxiety. You know, these are things that often I try to look at them as like gifts that something's off here. Even if I'm like, don't want to receive the message immediately, you know, I'm like, no, I don't want this message. But yeah, I think how I ultimately got here, though, the what's running through it all is, or how I stay here now, how I'm able to stay here and keep being intentional around what I'm creating, and also what choices I'm making now for the future, is around my values, knowing my value system really, really well. And I think that this is maybe where people get tripped up, because, you know, we are fed so much from the outside world in terms of social media and TV and advertising and so on, but particularly social media, I think. We do have a lot more choices than we've ever really had before. I feel like I've got many more choices than my mother had. You know, from her, I'm in my 40s now, but from her 20s onwards, she couldn't even open a bank account herself, you know, that sort of thing.
So wild.
So wild. So wild. So we have a lot of choices. We have a lot of outside input. It can be really confusing to figure out like, what steps do I want to take, or what is this decision right for me? And I really do feel that's where understanding your core values really comes in. So for me, my core values are freedom, minimalism, kind living, kind and slow living, personal growth, and community. They're like my five values. And when you look at the life that I live now in terms of digital, but it's like so perfect. And in terms of the way that I run my business, in terms of the kind design, ethical design, minimal design, it all ties into my core values. So how I figured these out, I was actually in Vanuatu when I was looking at how did I get this so wrong? But I don't think that you need to spend 2 months in a eco village to figure it out, because it actually only took me a morning. I was just having a cup of tea and I started journaling. And I think that one of the best ways that I figured this out was I looked at times in my life when I really felt not necessarily the happiest, but I felt like I was I felt like I was living a true reflection of who I was. I felt like, yes, this is really me. And so an example of that is like I'm plant-based. And when I decided to become plant-based, that just felt, while it was challenging at the time because it was like 20 years ago, that just felt really right for me. When I was traveling alone in my camper van and I really had nothing, just the minimal basics, I felt the most freest I've ever felt. These are all indicators to me that those are core, important parts of my value system, because when I have those elements in my life, it feels like whatever I'm doing feels like a natural extension of me. Like, this is naturally. It's so that you don't have to try, you don't have to force, you don't have to, sure, okay, you've got to try, but you don't have to push and force, Sometimes if you can't think of times where you felt that way, especially I think if you're in stress or unwell, our minds go, well, I've never felt that way. So, you can think of times where you felt the opposite. So you can think of times where you felt deeply out of alignment. And why? Like, why were you out of alignment? There'll be a core value sitting within there. So, for example, for me, I felt deeply out of alignment in my corporate environment when I was working there. Why? What was deeply out of alignment? Basically everything. But as an example, they were consulting me into mining companies, and like that deeply goes against so much of my morals and ethics. So what's in there? There's a core value of kind living sitting below that. Sitting below that discomfort is a core value of kind living, a desire for kind, slow living. I didn't like being told when I had to be in the office. I didn't like that I couldn't choose whether I wanted to work from home or be in the office. The job was actually okay. It was all of these other elements, And so when I looked at that, I was like, I'm craving freedom. That's actually one of my core values. So I think if you can figure these out by looking back at your life when you felt things are a natural extension and when things haven't been, or if you felt deeply uncomfortable, then you can use these values to paint the life and the business and anything else the relationships. Because my relationship with my partner, Craig, as well, we met 3 years ago now, and we have the same values. And so it's very easy for us. Our values show in different ways. Like, I'm like, don't buy that thing wrapped in plastic. And he's like, campaigning in environmental campaigns, and I'm like, I don't understand politics, so our values show up in different ways, but the underneath the values are the same, and so it makes it work. It's the same with my business and now with my lifestyle as well. Yeah. So that's that I don't know if I am courageous. I just know the alternative of not making decisions that align with my values, and sometimes I don't obviously get it right, and then I have to course correct, of course.
Yeah. That was so valuable for you to go into how you went about figuring out what your values are and really how you use them to build a life around those values. And you're right. I don't know of much that is more valuable in crafting an intentional life than knowing your values. And I think people can kind of have this like, feeling around values when you talk about it, just because if anybody's worked in the corporate space, they sort of think of like, there's always the corporate, like, these are our values, but then the corporation doesn't actually stick to those values at all. There's this weird incongruence happening where it's like, this is just lip service where nobody actually cares anything about these values.
That's totally true.
Yeah, but I think people can associate values with that, but I think Alana did such a wonderful job of illustrating what the value is of really knowing your own personal values to being able to craft that intentional life. And as you were sharing what your values are, we've never had that conversation, but as you were sharing them, I was like, I totally see that these are your values, and I see them lived out in your life, and they're very apparent. And that can be such a wonderful question to ask yourself as well, of if these are my values, if somebody saw my life, would they know that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Because like, as you're sharing it with me, I'm like, yep, totally see it lived out. Like, she's doing that. And if you were to share your values with somebody and they were like, huh? Like, I'm surprised at that. That means there's some work to do, and tweaking the alignment there, that you're not actually living those things out. So if you are listening to this and you have not yet dove into discovering your own personal values, that is a wonderful place to start. Like, step one is what I will say.
Yeah.
Step one.
Yeah, I think it's a great way of just making sense of you, like putting aside, like, I know I'm like, ugh, sit down and work out what your values are. Gross. But if you can think of it, it's like, okay, value. What does the word value mean? It means what's valuable to you, what's important to you, what should you prioritize? Like, and that it makes decision making so much easier, because you can just come back to these things are my core, at my core. They are what really is really important. If I live those, I feel like I'm living a natural extension of myself. My life opens up for me, it flows, all of those things. So maybe find a different, if your brain's going like, oh, gross values. Actually, mine is now too, but just find a different word for it. But, I do think it's a core piece of the puzzle that was missing for me in that whole process. Yeah.
I agree 100%. Well, I know you have mentioned and already shared with us that you're able to live this digital slow mad life and divide your time between Thailand and Australia. And something that I was really intrigued that you shared, because I know you and I share this background of really enjoying travel. I know, but also sharing with listeners, and because I can't remember if I shared this or not, but I quit when I got burnout, I quit my job and I backpacked around the world by myself, and went to many countries. But even before that, I was, backpacking, I've backpacked all of South America and Asia, Southeast Asia, lived in Europe, backpacked Eastern and Western Europe. It's something that I hold very dear, traveling and being immersed in different cultures and things like that. And I was just super intrigued when you shared that when you've learned that when you travel, you actually crave spaces that stimulate you, and maybe you wouldn't typically characterize as quote unquote calm. which is the opposite of what a lot of people may think you would want or expect as a highly sensitive person. And you quoted Ingrid Lee in the book Divergent Mind. And the quote said, "I think we mistake something that's calming for something that's less stimulating, when in fact, I think a lot of our environments are understimulating." So I would love to hear a little bit about this understimulation and actually craving stimulating spaces when you travel, even as a highly sensitive person.
Mm. Yeah, I love that quote. That just really resonated for me. And I was talking about it to a friend as well who happens to live in Asia as well. And she sort of has been doing the same thing, which is spending some time in Asia and some time in Australia. And she was saying that when she goes back to Australia, her anxiety and so on becomes like a lot more intense. And then and the same for me. And then when we come back to Asia, that seems to quieten down. And then I found that quote, and I was like, that's it. That describes it so well. I think that talking about dichotomies again, one of these that I have struggled with all my life to find a really good balance between is that this inner need for like excitement, risk taking, new adventures, with a deep inner need for safety and routine and calmness, and order. I need order, So these two would often fight against each other, or it would be a pendulum swing between the two. So I would create a really structured, ordered life, and then I would blow it all up because I was depressed. And then I would, blow it all up and then take some big risk, like quit my job and like buy a camper van or travel around Australia, or whatever it was. And then burn myself out from all of the excessive overstimulation and instability of that endeavor, because I've blown up my life. So I think as I've got older, I've learned that I can have both, particularly with the life that I've created for myself. I'm fortunate and lucky enough that I can choose to have both. And that's absolutely not by accident, Sure, I am a privileged white woman, for sure. So who has a family who hasn't supported me in terms of financials. But if I did ever fall, I know I have a safe place to go. So I do understand there's a high level of privilege that I have here when I say this. But I also intentionally created a life which allows me to have both adventures and fulfill that need for stimulation and risk-taking and excitement through new places, while also creating structure and order. So in travel, for me, that's looked just like my business, and everywhere else has looked like slowing the fuck down. Like really slowing it down. So Craig and I have been traveling for the last 2.5 years. A lot of that time we've just spent here where we are now, which is a little quiet island in Thailand called Koh Lanta. But we've done camper vanning through Europe, hiking through Himalayas. And I think the one that didn't suit me so well was the camper vanning through Europe, because we hopped every day, and that was really just way too much for me, moving every day. I did feel quite burnt out, energetically burnt out at the end of that. But I think, for example, we went to Vietnam before we came here, and we spent 2 weeks in Ho Chi Minh City, and people were like, 2 weeks? And that was great, because I could have these days of rest, recuperation. I could do my healthy routine, so do a workout, go. There were gyms there, whatever, do yoga, whatever. And so then when I went out into that highly overstimulating environment, I was prepared and I loved it. I soaked it in, like the noisy traffic and the delicious food and the people yelling at each other. And like, I just loved it. There was so much for me to take in. But if I was just hopping, I could have not done that because my nervous system would have been overwhelmed. And then I guess just, like my business, then when you think about the benefits of that, the flow-on benefits of creating something like that suits me, then I see all these other benefits in it. I'm more immersed in the culture. It's way cheaper to stay in one place than it is to hop around. It's less of an environmental impact. So there's all of these other things. Interestingly, when you live or make choices in alignment with one value, it will often then align with the other values, because that's what makes it feel so good. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's been my discovery the last couple of years. Yeah, is to slow down.
Yeah, I too, maybe that's why I resonate so much with this. I have that same dichotomy within me of really craving novelty, newness, adventures, and being someone who really thrives off of routine and predictability and having a stable structure. And oftentimes my husband will be like, how did you ever backpack around the world by yourself? Because what I see of you, like, you were just like, like really ordered. He's like, I want to know what that was like, because it feels like a very different side of you most of the time than like what I know. But I thrive in that, actually. It's like there's a different switch that turns on in me that like allows me to let go of some of that rigidity, maybe I would say, when I'm in more of these stimulating environments. And I know we had this conversation on Instagram when I saw that you made this post that piqued my interest in this bit. But right now I'm primarily, I'm not in a travel season in my life, which is very, very hard for me. I have a 1.5-year-old son. And so I am primarily like very stable and at home with him, and when I say at home, like most of the time we're in the four walls of our home, literally, right? And I shared with you, and I'll share with everyone listening as well, that of course there is a level of overstimulation with parenting, of like if there are temper tantrums and lots of noise and him, constantly making noises and all of this stuff, there is that element. But there's also this element of being highly understimulated by it, actually, understimulated intellectually, where I'm talking to, he's starting to talk more now, but I can't carry on an adult conversation and have an intellectual conversation with my 1.5-year-old, and understimulating by the way of not having those adult conversations, by not having the new experiences, by not seeing, going, doing new things. It's primarily the same routine day in and day out. We kind of do the same thing, rinse, wash, repeat day after day. And we need to do that in this season. But I think it's just interesting to sort of give these multiple examples and your life presently and in mine, of ways that you may actually be getting understimulated as a highly sensitive person, that you may be thinking like, I'm overstimulated, and it may be something to explore. Are you actually understimulated in some ways for some of your needs?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point that you make, Kim, too, about the seasons of your life. It's really easy just to beat yourself up, or like I often would do in the past, is just burn my whole life down, instead of like just going, hang on a second, let's just stop and look at what is really going on here, instead of burning it down to try and swing back the pendulum back the other way. And I also think, I was thinking, as you're saying about your husband, I would really like to see how this backpacking looked. And I don't know if you did this, but when I am traveling like that, I still have these little things that I do to keep order. So an example is when I get to a room, I'll get a glass and I'll get my toothbrush out and put it in that glass in the bathroom. Like, that's just one of the things that, like, that's my order. Like, that's there. Okay, that's my toothbrush. Or everything's got a specific space in the backpack or in
Yep.
the suitcase, you know. So I have these little, so then I was thinking the other way is if you're feeling like you're in an understimulated environment or a very structured, in a season of your life when you're in a very structured environment like you're describing now, you are, what's little things that you can do? Like, we create the little order in our highly unstructured life.
Yeah.
What's some unstructure or newness that even if it's tiny, that we can create in our very, very structured life? And I wonder if that would work. I personally haven't tried it, but I just thought of that then as we were chatting. Do you have things like that currently in your life?
I will do things as simple as, like, instead of turning left here, I'm going to turn right. Like, I'm serious, that simple. You know, I could get this way how I normally do in the route that I normally take, and I could also go this way, and this is a route I don't normally take. And so just to give myself some new scenery and different things to look at and get my brain out of the, like, I'm on autopilot mode, I'll just turn the other way. It can be something that simple, or it can be something as simple as, you know, there are a million coffee shops in my town and I haven't tried this one. Let's go to that one instead of our normal routine here, right? I can take the little elements of, you know, one of my values of novelty and be like, okay, how can I do that in my own city if it's not possible for me right now to be backpacking all over the world, which I would love to do at some point with my son and with my family, but now isn't the season for that. So how can I sort of bake that into where I am now? So I love that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, because I think, I sometimes think that we feel like the course correction has to be as big as the inner feeling we're having of being stuck or something needs to change. So we're like looking for this big thing to course correct this big feeling that we're having. But sometimes maybe the course correction actually doesn't need to be the same size as the intense feelings that we're having. You know, it could be quite minor.
What an amazing observation there. And just like you were saying, I have in the past, I mean, you heard, I quit my job, backpacked around the world. And I do think that was necessary for me at that point in time, but I can't do that at this point in my life, right? That's not something that I have the luxury of doing. And so just knowing, like you're saying, this does not have to be as big as the feeling, and that I don't have to blow everything up and go through this big pendulum swing, because I have certainly done that as well. Like, there can be the course corrections and the changes that have been sustainable for me have honestly been some of the smaller changes made over longer periods of time.
Totally. Me too. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to hear, you know, we've talked a lot about ways that you've been intentional about setting up your life and business that are supportive of who you actually are, not who should I be or what does society think that I should be, but who you actually are. And I'm curious if there are any other ways that you have crafted that others may not be thinking of doing or aren't doing currently.
Yeah. So I think on a small day-to-day basis, one of the things that I've been playing with this year particularly is incorporating what I'm calling incorporating rest into my business plan. Thanks ChatGPT for that. I'm trying to come up with a subject line for my newsletter, and ChatGPT gave me this, and I was like, that is brilliant. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. So now I'm just using, AI is good for some things, not good for others. But incorporating rest into my business plan. So that looks like I have every second Friday off completely. I wanted to have every Friday, but my brain still says no to that. So we'll work up to that. And I've also started doing this thing which I learned about from there's a podcast called The Neurodivergent Woman. It's run by two psychologists here in Australia. It's really great. Highly recommend listening to it. And one of the things that they talk about on there is something called regulation snacks. So it's just like, 2 or 3 minutes throughout your day where you take a moment to regulate your nervous system. So, either just sit in quiet or maybe go put your feet out on the grass or listen to like a 2-minute meditation. I think as a neurodivergent person and as a highly sensitive person, but I'm more likely to sort of push through and ignore. You think because you're so sensitive that you wouldn't push through so much, you couldn't ignore. But I do things like, I'll just finish this and then I can drink water, or I'll just finish this and then I can go to the toilet. And then I am dehydrated and busting for the toilet, or, and my nervous system's really unregulated. So being able to tell myself it's just for a minute or it's just for 2 minutes, like I can definitely do that, and then align it with having a big drink of water or something like that. So those have been just like little mini things on the day-to-day basis that I'm finding are helpful for me at the moment with supporting my nervous system. And then I think on a larger scale, like I've made a lot of choices which allow me to live a more simplified life, because I don't want to work loads. And yes, I have a partner, but we're very separate in terms of finances, so we don't share finances. I have to 100% support myself, and I think it's good to have these conversations, because I often wonder, women entrepreneurs, what are they doing? How are they supporting themselves? Do you have a part-time job? What do you like? Any of that is fine. Like, but I just want to say, my money is completely separate from Craig's, and I've had to work out ways in which I can balance the security that I need financially with the amount that I want to work, that allows for me to be building my business, but also to have those other outside creative endeavors and hobbies, which I think are really important for our well-being as well. So I've made a lot of sacrifices, I guess, or like chosen pathways that maybe other people haven't chosen to allow for that. So examples of that is Craig and I lived in our camper vans for over a year before we travelled overseas. And in the one spot, he was working on a campaign. It's just when Australia or Mullumbimby flooded. So we were there when there was those horrific floods. But we lived in our camper vans. One of the reasons we live in Asia, I mean, we do love it. So I'm not going to live anywhere that I don't live. But it's not really affordable for me to live in Australia at this point. All of my money would be going on rent and food, and I would have to work. I'd have to work a lot for that to happen. Whereas here, it's a lot cheaper, food and rent, and I don't have to work as much, so I can enjoy my life and do other creative pursuits. And I guess the other thing is as well that I've intentionally chosen not to have children. And, I really admire a lot of my friends have children, have gotten married. But for me personally, I've made the choice not to have children so that I can have more flexibility and choice in terms of, I mean, that's one of the reasons. The other reason for me is that I know deep down that I don't have the character, is what I normally say to people for having children. I just really, I just would not be a great parent. I just wouldn't. And I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to inflict that on anyone. And I don't know, it feels sort of funny talking about this, because I guess it's such a personal choice, isn't it,
Yeah.
as to whether we do that or not. And I think as women, also we're bombarded with whether we should,
Yeah.
whether we shouldn't. And it feels kind of edgy for me to say that and talk about that and like convey it in a way that I'm not judging anyone whether
Yeah.
they've chosen to do that or not chosen or haven't had a choice, because some women don't have a choice in that, both having a child or not having a child. So yeah, it feels kind of edgy to talk about that, but I think, you know, that it makes a huge difference, as you were talking about. As if you have a family, then there are different decisions that you have to make, and that gives me, you know, more flexibility than maybe someone who does have children.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing. I know that was edgy thing to share, but I think so many people will benefit from hearing it. And I think the more we can have consciousness and freedom of choice around that hugely tremendous and impactful decision, not just on you, but also on the child, the better, right? So I just honor you and making an aligned choice for you and for sharing about that in a way that will hopefully empower other women to do that specifically. Even as my choice was different, right? And I think that can be such a beautiful thing. Having two people having a conversation that made a different choice around that very impactful decision, and both of us making it from our true aligned decision making place, right? So, thank you so much for sharing.
I think that's really the key, you know, when we look back at the conversation that we've had today. Like, I think that we have so many pressures from society, particularly as women, in terms of what we're supposed to be doing, how we're supposed to be looking, you know, all of those kinds of things, and having children or not having children. And if we're making choices from that space of what is a natural extension of me, what is really important to me, what is my value system, then, you know, you really can't go. I just don't think you can go wrong if you do it that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel like you naturally went into my next question that I was going to ask. And that is just that I'm going to shift into doing kind of a rapid fire closing, which is just quick questions that I ask at the end in order to help us get to know you a little bit more. And you don't have to think too deeply about these. You can just sort of fire off whatever first comes to your mind. But that is the first question that I ask in closing is there anything you'd like to say in closing that feels like it needs another moment to wrap up from our podcast today?
Yeah, I would say definitely the values thing. And I would also say, like, don't be scared of your dichotomies. Like, I think you can find, like, they can really serve you in finding like a life, because they can be so extreme. They can serve you in finding just that perfect balance for yourself.
I love that. I'm taking that one away with me too. It's not that I don't know that, but I think it's so encouraging to see somebody who has really allowed for all parts of yourself to have space. I think we can get stuck in our mind thinking, well, I'll give this part space, but not this one. I will prioritize this, but not this. And I think your life is such a beautiful example of you can give all parts of yourself priority and all parts of yourself space. And that, like you're saying, those dichotomies don't have to be at war with one another and doesn't have to mean like this is the only part that gets attention.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, my next question is, I just love what comes up with this question. So I'm really excited to see what comes up. No pressure, but what do you wish people knew about your experience as a highly sensitive neurodivergent person in the world?
Oh, God, what do I wish people knew? I wish maybe other highly sensitive neurodivergent people would know this. So I think this is more directed at neurotypical people. But I wish that people understood how much senses can hurt, because then I think the world would be more considerate and kind of that. Like, sound really hurts me. It physically hurts me, like loud noises, angle grinding, that it hurts. Flashing lights hurt. So I wish that the world knew or could experience that. I think the world would just actually be nicer for all of us sensory wise if we all felt things to that extreme.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very hard, I think, for neurotypical people to truly have any sort of an understanding of that. And I agree with you that it is physically painful. And it's very challenging to convey that when that is not somebody else's experience of, like, what do you mean? How can like something sensory wise be physically painful like that? And I think that creates such a disconnect and feeling understood and feeling seen and feeling validated and feeling like your experience matters. I feel like I grew up almost kind of my entire childhood feeling gaslit out of my own experience, because it was always this thing of like, well, it's not that bad. I'm like, well, to me, it is that bad. It is physically
But you're just
painful.
sensitive. You're just too sensitive. Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that invalidates, because I'm sensitive, that means my point of view is not valid. No.
Yeah.
Probably makes it more valid.
Yeah.
You're the canary in the
problem, right? I'm the problem, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is the last thing that truly surprised you?
Thing that truly surprised me. I started riding a scooter, and it surprised me because I really didn't think that I would be able to do it. I was very, very, very afraid. And I mean, I used to ride motorbikes when I was a kid, so I know how to ride. It was actually just the terror of it. And so I surprised myself, and I was surprised by how freaking good I felt when I was like, I just did this thing that was like incredibly terrifying for me. And it's been a long while since I felt that incredibly terrified. Probably like the last time I felt that terrified is when I first started playing live music again a couple of years ago. But yeah, just how good I felt afterwards. Like I felt a shift or something, which I haven't felt in a long time. So that surprised me. Yeah. And now I'm independent and I have my own scooter, and I don't have to walk everywhere in the rain. So
that's amazing. I crashed maybe a scooter when I was in Thailand and in Southeast Asia. I can resonate with that terrified feeling on those scooters. So I totally understand. I love it.
Yeah. Everyone's got a horror story, don't they? Everyone.
Yes. Yeah. With those scooters in particular. Yes.
Yeah.
What consistently brings you deep joy?
Oh, these questions are good. What consistently brings me deep joy? I mean, I haven't done it for a while because the weather has been so terrible, but morning walks on the beach will always make me feel really joyful. That's one of the reasons why I love living here. Yeah.
Are you a beach person more than a mountain person?
Same, either.
Okay.
Yeah, either.
And in Thailand, most of the time you can get both.
You do, yeah. Here, particularly on this island, because it's very small and you've got the beach and then you've got a strip of jungle. But I would say that I used to be a mountain forest person, and then I traveled around the outside of Australia in my camper van in 2014. And I was like, you got to, you're by the beach, you've got to do this. And I started doing early morning beach swims. That's probably the other thing that always brings me joy, is just dunking my head in the ocean, even if it's freezing cold. That's a way to start the day, right? I think. Yeah.
Well, Alana, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share with us today, for being on the Sensitive podcast, and honestly, for just being a living, breathing example of what is possible as a highly sensitive, neurodivergent person. I have found this so inspiring, and I know so many others will as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Kim. That was awesome.
Absolutely.